This adventurous story begins in North America, depicting a time when people lived in ancient ways. There were different tribes that did everything they could to survive. Over time, these tribes gradually developed themselves, but at the same time, danger began to loom over the land of North America. Some dangerous groups had built large ships and traveled from place to place with their entire armies. Wherever they went, they killed the tribal people and took control of their lands. One such moment is shown in the story, where a massive ship appears on the North American coast. This ship belongs to a Viking army that has come to conquer new lands. The Viking army invades the land, slaughtering the tribes because they wanted to take complete control. The Vikings were so cunning and powerful that they had never lost a battle before. Among the invading army was the son of the Viking chieftain. The chieftain called his son and handed him a sword, ordering him to kill a man. The Vikings intended to wipe out the entire tribe. However, the chieftain's son despised violence. He refused, saying he could not do it, and threw the sword to the ground. This enraged the Viking chieftain, who then struck his own son violently. Wounded and terrified, the chieftain's son ran back toward the ship. Although the Vikings had come with a well-thought-out plan, they underestimated the North American tribes. Even though the tribes lacked advanced weapons, they had overwhelming numbers. Seeing the Viking invasion, all the tribes united to fight back. In no time, the tribes launched a fierce attack on the Vikings, slaughtering them all, including the Viking chieftain. The only survivor of the Viking army was the chieftain's son, who had retreated to the ship earlier. Meanwhile, a North American woman from one of the tribes is introduced. As she walks through the forest, she spots a white horse and is shocked. Among her people, there was a belief that seeing a white horse was a sign of an impending attack by a demonic army. Following the white horse, the woman reaches the coastline, where she sees the massive Viking ship. She is astonished, having never seen such a large ship in her life. Gathering her courage, she steps inside, only to find the wounded son of the Viking chieftain. The chieftain's son was terrified, so he placed his sword in front of the woman as a sign of surrender, hoping she wouldn't harm him. The woman, however, understood that the boy was simply scared. She decided to take him back safely to her tribe. Once she returned, she told her people that she wanted to adopt the boy and raise him among them. However, the tribe was not willing to accept him. They saw him as the enemy's son and believed he could not be trusted. Despite their reluctance, the woman managed to convince them. She named the boy Ghost because of his pale complexion and ghostly appearance. As time passed, Ghost grew up among the tribal people. 20 years went by, and he transformed into a strong and handsome young man. He still carried the sword from his childhood and practiced fighting and swordsmanship daily. Although he lived with the tribe, he always felt the need to prove himself as a great warrior, someone no one could defeat. Nearby, there was another tribe that lived in the mountainous region. Their chieftain was known as Pathfinder, a man with a unique ability to discover new lands with ease. Pathfinder had a daughter named Starfire. Over time, it became clear that Ghost had fallen in love with her. However, things weren't so simple. Another warrior from the mountain tribe, named Steel, was also in love with Starfire. Steel had always suspected that Ghost harbored feelings for her, and because of this, he never treated Ghost kindly. He saw him as a rival and maintained a constant grudge against him. A fighting competition was soon announced among the mountain tribes. The winner of this competition would be named the next Pathfinder. Ghost wanted to participate, but he was denied entry because he did not belong to their tribe. This deeply upset him, and he was forced to walk away. Determined to become stronger, Ghost continued to train tirelessly. He still remembered the Vikings who had arrived with their massive ships 20 years ago, bringing chaos and destruction. Since that day, he had not seen another Viking or any large ships approaching the land. But the next day, Ghost's worst fears came true. He saw massive ships approaching the shore. The Vikings had returned. Their brutal warriors stormed into the tribes, mercilessly slaughtering anyone in their path. Chaos spread rapidly, and many of Ghost's people were killed. Unable to bear the destruction, Ghost ran deep into the forest, desperate to find a way to save his tribe. The Vikings were relentless, leaving no survivors. Hiding behind trees and bushes, Ghost observed their movements carefully. However, the Viking chieftain was sharp and quickly spotted him. He ordered one of his soldiers to capture Ghost. Sensing the danger, Ghost swiftly drew his sword and struck down the approaching soldier. He quickly took the fallen Viking's shield and ran, knowing he couldn't fight the entire army alone. His best chance was to attack one soldier at a time while using the forest to his advantage. Ghost knew the terrain better than anyone. He moved through hidden paths, making it nearly impossible for the Vikings to find him. Frustrated, the Viking chieftain ordered his soldiers to track Ghost's footprints, believing he would lead them to other surviving tribes. The soldiers spread deep into the forest, determined to capture him. Ghost, however, fought back strategically. One by one, he ambushed the Vikings, killing several of them. But after an intense series of battles, his body grew weak. Exhausted and wounded, he slumped onto a shield and slid down a slope to escape. Meanwhile, the surviving Viking soldiers reported back to their leader that Ghost had fled. The chieftain, however, was not concerned. He ordered his men to track Ghost's footprints, confident they would lead him to more tribes to conquer. On the other side, Ghost stumbled upon the mountain tribe. Their warriors, including Pathfinder, immediately recognized him. Seeing his injuries, they took him in, determined to help him recover. Even in his weakened state, Ghost warned them, "Don't take me with you. They're tracking me. If I go to your village, they'll find you, too." But the mountain warriors refused to leave him behind and took him to their camp. Once there, they treated Ghost's wounds carefully, ensuring he would recover as quickly as possible. After resting for some time, Ghost began to regain his strength. Ghost gathered the remaining warriors and urgently warned them, "The Vikings destroyed my tribe. They will come here next. We must leave now and find a safer place." But Steel, who had always despised Ghost, stood up and growled, "We will not run. This is our land, and we will fight to defend it." The rest of the warriors agreed, unwilling to abandon their home. Ghost, however, tried to reason with them. "The Vikings have sharp swords, heavy armor, and shields that your spears cannot pierce. If you face them head-on, they will slaughter you all." But no one listened. Frustrated and knowing what was coming, Ghost left the camp alone. Meanwhile, Pathfinder's warriors marched forward, determined to confront the Vikings. As they traveled, they reached Ghost's destroyed village and saw the horrifying truth: everything was burned, and the people were slaughtered. Ghost was telling the truth, Pathfinder murmured grimly. The Vikings were here. Despite witnessing the destruction, Pathfinder's warriors still refused to back down. They quickly sent the women and children to a hidden mountain refuge, ensuring their safety. Meanwhile, the remaining warriors prepared for battle, unaware that a direct fight against the Vikings was a death sentence. However, one person understood the danger: Starfire, Pathfinder's daughter. Fearing for her people, she went in search of Ghost. When she found him, she pleaded, "Our warriors are going to fight the Vikings. Please, Ghost, we need your help. You are part of our tribe now." Ghost hesitated but eventually agreed to return. Back at the camp, Ghost stood before the warriors and declared, "If you want to defeat the Vikings, we must fight smart, not strong. A direct attack will get us all killed." He revealed a secret plan, an ambush strategy using the forest. Instead of confronting the Vikings head-on, they would use the trees, the shadows, and the terrain to their advantage. The warriors listened carefully. This was the same tactic Ghost had used before, hunting the Vikings one by one. With the battle approaching, they prepared to turn the forest into a deadly trap. Pathfinder and his entire tribe trust Ghost and follow the plan he devised. Within a short time, many Vikings begin arriving, but Ghost and his tribe members are already hiding deep within the forest, waiting for the perfect moment to launch a surprise attack. As soon as the Vikings arrive, the tribe members ambush them one by one. The sudden attack catches the Vikings off guard, and the tribe successfully kills many Viking soldiers. However, the Vikings are much more powerful, and as their numbers increase, they start overpowering the tribe members. Many of the tribe members even get caught in their own traps, leading to significant losses. Ghost, despite his skills, realizes that he alone cannot stand against so many Vikings. Meanwhile, the Viking chief arrives at the battlefield and captures everyone, including the tribe's leader, his daughter, and Ghost. When the Viking chief sees Ghost, he is shocked because Ghost looks exactly like one of them. The chief then reveals a long-hidden truth: years ago, a Viking army had arrived at this very place. Their leader was a brave warrior, but due to poor planning, the entire Viking army was wiped out. However, the leader's son survived and disappeared. Now, the Viking chief is certain that Ghost is that very boy who had escaped years ago. But the Viking chief's priority is to find the remaining tribe members who had been sent to safety by Ghost and the others. He questions Pathfinder about their location, but the tribal leader refuses to reveal anything. Enraged by his silence, the Viking chief kills Pathfinder. Despite witnessing this, Ghost remains quiet and does not disclose anything. When the Viking chief turns to Pathfinder's daughter for answers, she, too, stays silent. Infuriated, the chief moves to kill her as well. Just then, Ghost interrupts and says he knows where the remaining tribe members are and that he can lead them there. This makes the Vikings pause, turning their attention to Ghost. And now, the Vikings started following Ghost, believing he would lead them to the rest of the tribe. Pathfinder's daughter was furious, thinking Ghost had betrayed them, but he had a plan in mind that he continued to execute. First, Ghost led the entire Viking army to his old tribe's village, which had been abandoned long ago, with the remaining tribe members having already moved to the mountainous region. The village was completely empty, which made the Vikings question him. However, Ghost pretended not to know where everyone had gone. To further confuse them, Ghost took the Vikings to another deserted village. Finding nothing there either, the Viking chief grew suspicious and angry at Ghost. But just then, Ghost subtly dropped a small doll from his pocket. When one of the Viking soldiers picked it up and showed it to the chief, they noticed that the doll was facing east. This convinced the Viking chief that the remaining tribe members must have gone in that direction. Without wasting time, the entire Viking army marched eastward. After some time, they arrived in a freezing, snow-covered region. The temperature was brutally low, and snow continued to fall from the sky. Before them lay a large, frozen river, covered with a thick layer of ice. The Viking chief ordered everyone to cross straight through it. But Ghost, knowing better, warned him that the ice would become thinner as they moved forward, making the path extremely dangerous. He suggested taking a safer route through the forest, but the Viking chief dismissed his concerns, insisting they cross the frozen river since it was a direct and seemingly easier path. Ignoring Ghost's warning, the Vikings forced him to lead the way. Ghost moved forward cautiously, but soon he realized that the ice ahead was dangerously thin and about to break. Within moments, a large section of the ice collapsed, sending many Vikings plunging into the freezing water. They struggled against the icy depths, desperately trying to escape. Even Starfire briefly fell into the water, but Ghost quickly rescued her. The remaining Vikings managed to pull themselves out as well. With no other option, the Viking chief decided to take the mountainous path. As they ventured further, he spotted several frozen corpses, people who had perished in the extreme cold. This convinced him that they were on the right track and that they would soon find the remaining tribe members. However, the biggest challenge was yet to come. The path through the mountains was dangerously narrow, and one wrong step could mean falling to certain death. Ghost carefully led the way, holding on to Starfire, while the Vikings cautiously followed behind. The path was so narrow that one of the Vikings lost his footing and fell to his death. Seeing this, the Viking chief ordered everyone to tie themselves together with ropes, ensuring that if one soldier slipped, the others could pull him back up. Ghost and Starfire were also tied up, putting their lives at risk since they were leading the group. The entire Viking army kept advancing cautiously along the treacherous path, determined to capture the remaining tribe members. For the Viking chief, this was more than just a battle, it was revenge. Years ago, these same tribespeople had killed his Viking ancestors, and now he was determined to wipe them out and seize their land. However, what the Vikings didn't realize was that Ghost had a plan of his own. After walking a bit farther, Ghost discreetly signaled Starfire to attack him. This was a crucial part of his strategy to take down the Vikings. Starfire quickly understood and, without hesitation, began attacking Ghost in a fit of rage. The Vikings watched as Ghost stumbled and fell, appearing wounded. Just then, the Viking chief arrived, furious at Starfire. No matter what, Ghost was still one of them, a Viking by blood. The chief lifted Ghost back to his feet, handed him a weapon, and commanded him to strike Starfire as punishment for attacking one of their own. Although Ghost had lived among the tribespeople, he was still of Viking descent, and the chief was giving him full permission to kill Starfire. But this was all part of Ghost's master plan. Instead of attacking Starfire, he picked up a rope, placed a stone inside it, and swung it with all his might, striking the last Viking in the line. The soldier was knocked unconscious and fell off the cliff. Since they were all tied together, the impact pulled many other Vikings down with him, sending them plummeting to their deaths. The Viking chief watched in horror as dozens of his soldiers were dragged off the edge. Furious, he lunged at Ghost to attack him. Fortunately, some soldiers managed to cut the ropes in time, preventing more from falling. Still, Ghost's strategy had worked. He had eliminated a massive portion of the Viking army in one swift move. Their forces had now been reduced to less than half. The Viking chief tried to kill Ghost, but Starfire was fighting alongside him. She managed to attack the Viking chief's ear, injuring him badly. However, Ghost realized a dangerous fact: the rope that connected the chief's body also connected him and Starfire. If the Viking chief fell, they would all be dragged down with him. Thinking quickly, Ghost rushed forward and used his sword to cut the rope that tied Starfire to the chief. Now, Starfire was completely safe. Ghost then pushed the Viking chief, but in the process, he was also pulled down since the rope was still attached to his own body. Luckily, their rope got tangled in a large rock, leaving both of them hanging in midair. The Viking chief's weight had increased drastically because another Viking soldier was also hanging on to the same rope. Desperate to save himself, the chief cruelly cut the rope and let his own soldier fall to his death. Ghost was still dangling from the cliff, but he had no sword to fight with. Meanwhile, the Viking chief climbed upward, repeatedly kicking and punching Ghost to make him fall. He even started throwing rocks at him. However, Ghost struggled and kept climbing. Realizing he needed an advantage, Ghost let out a loud scream, creating vibrations across the mountains. This triggered an avalanche, and huge amounts of snow came crashing down. Starfire quickly took shelter at the edge of the cliff, keeping herself safe. The Viking chief, however, was caught in the chaos. The falling snow distracted him, giving Ghost enough time to climb up. Though both of them were injured, Ghost spotted his sword lying nearby, the very sword he had kept since he first arrived in the tribe after his Viking family was massacred. Without hesitation, Ghost grabbed his weapon and faced the Viking chief. Their final battle began. The Viking chief fought fiercely, unwilling to accept defeat. But Ghost had trained for this moment for a long time. He knew that one day, he would have to face this exact battle. When the time came for him to showcase his swordsmanship and save others, Ghost was fully prepared. He had been training day and night for this very moment. Seeing Ghost's sword skills, even the Viking chief was astonished because even he couldn't wield a sword with such expertise. For a while, they continued to fight fiercely, but Ghost had no intention of showing mercy. With his sword, he inflicted multiple wounds on the Viking chief's body and pushed him towards the edge of the mountain. Realizing that he could not defeat Ghost no matter what, the Viking chief began to plead, saying, "You are also a part of the Viking family. You cannot kill one of your own." But Ghost replied firmly, "I am not a Viking. I belong to the North American tribal group. I have always been a part of them, and I will do everything to protect them." Without hesitation, Ghost struck the Viking chief down, sending him plunging off the mountain. With the chief's death, the Viking army was completely annihilated. Now, Ghost safely led Starfire down the mountain. Soon, they reached the place where the rest of the tribe lived. If Ghost had not taken action, the Vikings would have reached the tribe and slaughtered them all. The entire tribe came to know of Ghost and Starfire's bravery. In deep gratitude, they all bowed before them, for it was Ghost and Starfire who had saved them from total destruction. Recognizing his leadership and courage, the tribe unanimously chose Ghost as their new pathfinder. Since Starfire's father had passed away, the tribe needed a new leader. They all believed that no one was more capable than Ghost. Even Steel, one of the tribe's most skilled warriors, agreed. Ghost accepted the responsibility and became their new pathfinder. He also confessed his love to Starfire, who, overwhelmed with joy, agreed to marry him. Ghost promised the tribe that no matter what happened, he would always protect them. He began to guide them wisely, preparing them for any future threats. Ghost then returned to the lake where the Viking ships had been destroyed. However, he knew that more Viking forces could arrive at any moment. He understood that the tribe needed to be ready. Determined to strengthen the tribe, Ghost started training them in combat and survival techniques. He embraced his role as their leader, guiding them toward a secure future. With that, our adventurous tale comes to an end.